In which way did you contribute to the understanding of the renal anatomy?
I think in order for me to understand anything, it had to be simple, and I had to understand it. Talk to me about understanding how electrons run through a wire and you get a light turning on. It's beyond my comprehension or something. I've got to actually see it and be able to understand it. So I would simplify everything and try and use models. So with renal anatomy, I used ice cream cones, and with a blob of ice cream on the top as the cortex and medulla, and I'd put things in simple terms, and this seemed to be appreciated by the audiences around, because the lectures were generally very well received. And as you know, I got that one plaque given to me by the faculty for the only person who'd ever got full marks in a continuing medical education lecture. In other words, everybody in the audience gave me a 5 out of 5, whatever it was.
But as I understood, your contributions were in a different way of looking at that anatomy and the urogenital diaphragm, those basic anatomic things that you approached in a different way. And
yeah, I think the urogenital diaphragm was not something that I picked up myself. That the guy from Mayo Clinic, Bob, just slipped my mind his name, but he first told me about the fact that the urogenital diaphragm wasn't as described, and so I went into it, and there was an anatomist who had basically said this, who really got it right and understood it. So I read his work, and then I corroborated that work when I got to Australia. It wasn't well known in the urologic community, and even in the anatomical community and the textbooks, all had it wrong. They said there's a urogenital diaphragm, which really doesn't exist. They said there's a striated external sphincter between two membranes. Well, the top membrane doesn't exist. There was only a bottom membrane, and it wasn't it's not just a small circular muscle. It was an extensive muscle. So I think I more popularized the understanding of the striated external sphincter, and I was very fortunate when I got to Australia. As I had the opportunity to get a baboon that had to be put down, and I was asked if I would be interested in using it for research. So I took off that whole day as my research day, and I went and dissected out this baboon, and then could really show how comparative anatomically how the external sphincter was, because in this baboon it was like equivalent to a young 5-year-old human before the prostate developed. And then I published that in the Australian New Zealand Journal, and then I gave again innumerable lectures. But I think the one significant contribution was, and again I was really lucky in Australia, is that I had the contacts I made both in the anatomy department and especially with Kate Creed, Dr. Kate Creed in the veterinary science department, because the one thing that had always worried me in our textbooks was that this striated muscle, they said, was a unique mammalian muscle in that it was innervated by both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, that never made sense to me, how a striated muscle could be innervated by the parasympathetic nervous system, or by the autonomic, I should say not the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. That's so, because all striated muscle is innervated by somatic nerves. So it never made sense to having this little sphincter as a unique mammalian muscle. So when I got to Australia, and then I went to visit Kate Creed, and she was a world expert in smooth muscle physiology, and I said, Kate, I want you to change from being a smooth muscle physiologist to becoming a striated muscle physiologist, and somehow you've got to do some experiments to show that the striated external sphincter is innervated only by the somatic nervous system. and not by the autonomic nervous system. And she did some very sophisticated dog dissections. And what she showed basically was that the autonomic nerves went through the striated muscle, but was not innervating them, and they were innervated only by the somatic nervous system. And they passed through the striated muscle to innervate the more centrally placed smooth muscle part of the sphincter. So that was, that was pretty good.
Keith, can you explain to me why those kidney and the anatomic instruction that you gave was important?
So if we come back to the kidney again, again the other thing was that at that stage we weren't doing many CAT scans, so we were doing mainly IVPs, in which you've only really got two planes, and you'd see the calyces, some of them you'd see side on and some you'd see end on, and you had to know which ones were projecting into which part of the kidney. I'm not going to go into the whole anatomy of it, but basically I think one of the radiologists, Neil Wasserman, had told me that, well, the ones you see side on are, I can't remember the anterior, posterior ones you see end on are the others. And then I remember going through various drawings that had been done of the kidney, especially work that had come out of Johns Hopkins actually, showing the kidneys and how they were situated. And then I correlated, I made models of the kidney. Arthur had the idea of injecting silastic into a kidney, and then I did that, and I made a whole lot of models of the kidney, plastic models. So I used these plastic models to demonstrate which calyces were anterior and which were posterior when seen side on or end on the IVP. Nowadays that's really rather superfluous because CAT scans are done, so you can just tell exactly where it is. But in those days they weren't being done. And so then people could interpret the IVP properly, and when they started doing percutaneous procedures, it would then help them to know exactly which calyces they were sticking the needle into, and exactly where the stone was. So, and then also I'd give like simple examples in the lecture of like the renal artery. Well, there are 5 main branches, and it's like a hand. So that's the posterior segmental artery, and these are the 4, and it seemed to fit in exactly. And then having the ice cream cones in the lecture theatre and everything.
Yeah, but so it significantly changed things for pragmatic reasons. I mean,
yeah,
that
no, I think it helped
understood.
people. So, yeah, and I mean, these lectures really went down very well. I remember one guy coming up and saying, "Well, Keith, in this whole course, the only thing I really learned that was new was your lecture on anatomy," which is a bit strange.
I found that very significant.
I had a lot of fun because I got nice positive feedback and positive pats on the back for the lectures. And then I expanded out, of course, and then I gave other courses. I gave courses at the American Urological Association. I gave these courses on renal anatomy for many, many years. Then I gave courses on outpatient surgery for many years. I think those are the main ones.
And what about the seeds for prostatic cancer?
Yeah, and then we started doing the brachytherapy.
You were a leader in the state.
Yeah, I was probably the 2nd or 3rd in the country to do it. But again, it's who you know and how they influence you. So, I'm not remembering names very well today. But this guy of Danish origin, what is his name?
Barking.
Through the lectures in outpatient surgery around the country, he was also invited there. He was of Danish, born in Denmark, but lived here. He then went to Denmark, and they were doing brachytherapy. He came back and put on the very first course in brachytherapy in Seattle, and Doug Olson and I went to that course because I said, Doug, come with. So he came along, And then we came back and started doing the procedures at Methodist Hospital.
And for everybody that doesn't understand, brachytherapy is
Putting radioactive seeds through little with using needles that contain these little seeds and pushing them behind the scrotum into the prostate under ultrasound guidance. And so then Doug and I started doing them, and then eventually we started putting courses on. So we put on our own course in Minneapolis, and then we were invited to participate in courses throughout the country. And then eventually, that's how I got to Australia, because of the it wasn't only that. It was the outpatient surgery.
was everything.
I'm trying to think what and the ultrasound. Yeah.
But you, when we went to Australia, you had been invited for what? To give on a course?
I was trying to think. It was the.
Wasn't it a brachytherapy course?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was a brachytherapy test. Why was I invited? Was it? It was ultrasound. It was prostate ultrasound. That's what it was. Again, and the one thing that I do is I seem to pick up early on trends which seem to work out well. I'm not the inventor of things usually.
No, but you have the
But
ability.
I think I have the ability to see what's going to be good. I think so.
Yeah.
So that's right. I picked up on prostate because of my interest in outpatient surgery, and then I was invited every year. I remember we went to Atlanta with Harold McDonald.
All over.
And we went all over, and that at Harold McDonald, one of Harold McDonald's courses, he told us about this new way of looking at the prostate with ultrasound. So then I got interested in prostate ultrasound. And then we got, I think, the very first prostate ultrasound machine in Minnesota and started doing prostate ultrasounds. Then we started doing ultrasound-guided biopsies. And I remember going to the famous Johns Hopkins Hospital, and Pat Walsh was there. And he was saying, oh, I don't need ultrasound to do biopsies. I can just use my finger to just stick in and get just as good of biopsies. I don't need this ultrasound. In any case, we started doing ultrasound-guided biopsies, and then I got involved with that. And I think that was why I was invited to Australia to introduce prostate ultrasound into Australia. And those were the lectures that I gave and put on the courses in Australia in prostate ultrasound. And then we started doing the brachytherapy, started coming back to that in the States and putting on courses with that. So I was involved with a lot of different courses around. Did a course on prostate ultrasound in South Africa at one time when there was the South African Neurological Association meeting. So that all evolved as a consequence of interest in outpatient surgery.
Keith, just one question. You were active, very, very active academically with all these. You have an ability to see what's important, and you seize it, and you run and you move with that. But you moved from academics to private practice. You called me up one day and you said, I'm doing this, and I said, really? Why?
I guess I didn't like, I always had, there was always a professor or somebody above me in academics. I didn't see myself on a trajectory to work up to be a head of a department. That had never been my aim, was to be a head of a department. But on the other hand, I didn't want to be under somebody for the rest of my life and told what I had to do. And also things that you had to do that are not my forte was like writing grants and things. I just, to me it was to have to do a whole lot of research work and work for hours and hours and weeks and writing a grant, and then somebody says, well, you can't get the money. So that was not my scene.
So do you think it was an independence issue?
I think so, probably an independence issue, and also the opportunities, to be my own boss to a degree. to do it my way, what I wanted to do under my own control, and without having to publish or perish. So and then, but I liked the academics. So and then when I was asked to go, Arthur said maybe you want to talk to so and so about going into practice. So I went and spoke to them. They made it sound very nice. Oh, you can take off a Wednesday afternoon and you can go sailing and you can spend more time with the family and take as much leave as you want to or not as you want to. So these are all very enticing things.
So it was Arthur who...
Well, Arthur put me up to it. He said, "Go." They're looking for a partner. Milt Rice is retiring, so go and speak to Kern and Mogadam. And Mogadam was a very charming, very nice guy, and I thought, well, that'd be great. Let's see how it goes. But I was always interested in the academics, so I was very lucky in that I could pursue the academics, but on my terms. So, like, do the outpatient surgery, do the brachytherapy, do the prostate ultrasound. And, I mean, being invited, for me, the highlight of my career, I think, is being invited to talk at all these different places and getting, recognition from around that what I was saying and the way I was saying it was well received. Being graded by my peers and getting, full marks from everybody in the audience. The fact that every 10 years they have the teachers meeting, and here's little Keith Kaye from South Africa who was invited to teach the teachers. And I remember at that stage I was doing the prostate ultrasound anatomy and putting the courses on. So to teach the teachers, my lecture was, I had all the professors like Pat Walsh and all these guys making models of the prostate using Tinker toys and drinking straws and a bit of ice cream cones and things like that. They were all playing. I said, no, Dr. Walsh, you really just don't get the external sphincter. If you're putting this bit of the model here like that, you just don't quite get it. I mean,
I didn't know
it was fun,
So that
was great. Really...
Okay, Keith, let's fast forward. You were invited to come and set up a department of urology, the first of its kind in Australia. Why did you take that? What was the fascination? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, we were very clearly, it was when we all went to put on this prostate ultrasound course, and then they said they were opening the first department of urology, not the first full professorship of urology in Australia. And would I be interested? And as we were walking up the stairs to the dinner that night, and then you said, no, you're not interested, and I said, yes, I was interested. But it appealed to me. It was different. I wouldn't have liked again to be head of a department in America. That didn't kind of appeal to me. But this appealed to me, I think, for two reasons. One, it was the very first. So it was not like I'd be taking over from somebody else. Here was a whole brand new field of endeavour. And also it was in Australia, which was more similar to the way things were done in South Africa. And again, I could see myself starting this whole big new thing, but without the background of having to write numerous grants. And I'd had no laboratory experience. Remember, so mine was purely clinical and set it up. And then I had the incredible example of the States, how things had been done, and bringing that there. So it was just, it was an amazing, incredible opportunity. And I liked Australia. I liked Australia, and I thought it would be good for all of us. And we obviously had our differing views, but that's just the way it was.
I think that was the timing.
Yeah.
And so then you went and you were welcomed by everyone.
Yeah, I sure was.
And how did that set up? How did it?
It was amazing. It was amazing for my ego. Here I was, articles in the paper about me coming. There was TV interviews, all the sort of the guy, I can never remember his name, my patient who had the Australian guy who was like Speaker of the West Australian Government House, called me up before I even came. He had prostate cancer, and he was told that nothing, he couldn't be cured, but all that could be done for him would be to cut his balls off. And he said, "No, cut my balls off." So in any case, he called, and from what he told me, I said, "Look, it sounds as if you're very much a candidate for radical prostatectomy." So, he said, "Will I do it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but haven't you got anybody there? And what about your urologist there?" And in any case, to cut a long story short, here when I got to Australia, I couldn't operate at the time because I'd amputated the end of my finger before I left the States. And I told him, I said, "Look, I'm sorry, I can't operate." He said, "No, he'll wait for me." I said, "Well, I don't know, it's going to take me a few months." And then he organised a special welcoming party at Government House. So here were all the top West Australian members of government at Government House having a party welcoming Keith Kaye to Western Australia, to the University of Minnesota. So that was...
University of...
University of Western Australia, I mean. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful building, University of Western Australia.
But Keith, I think, in summary with Australia, it was a very successful time for you, academically. Socially, it was interesting for you, and for our children, it was difficult, but I think it was a good experience for them.
Yeah, it was obviously for both of us an incredibly difficult, challenging time. It was, as you say, very exciting, setting up a new department. And here I had the opportunity to build my own department, put up... What did we say?
No, but the other thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't is the fact what incredible service you gave those people. Even to this day, you're hearing from survivors that would never have survived. You provided an incredible service.
I was lucky because I'd had the training now in America, the training with radical prostatectomy, the training with American ways, and now that was what I found so exciting, was taking these best in the world ways, taking them to Australia. I mean, they hadn't been doing radical prostatectomies basically until I got there. So, there I could show them what I'd learnt and evolve myself along the field. And then I could combine the knowledge of anatomy and the teaching of anatomy with the surgery and do what I wanted to. I could do exactly what I wanted to do. I did prostate cancer when I got there. That's all I did. And then I could do it, so got them started on radical prostatectomies, introduced brachytherapy into Australia, put on courses in brachytherapy, and then had prostate cancer clinics and centres. And so it was an incredibly exciting time professionally to be there. I had this full department. I had a biostatistician in the department. I had nurse practitioners who were then running not clinics but patient groups, support services. The patients were all very nice, and it was just an amazingly exciting, interesting time. And there were challenges in that some people said I shouldn't be screening for prostate cancer, and then that it was self-serving because I'm saying you should get screening. Therefore, more patients were being diagnosed, and that was to my benefit because but that's part of the deal, and I didn't take it to heart. I remember 60 Minutes. Kaye said they wanted to interview me, so I said sure. And I had a lot of TV interviews, and then somebody came to me and said, "You know what 60 Minutes does?" I said, well, I didn't really know. They said they basically are out to get you. In other words, to say, oh, look, you're doing all the screening because it's to your advantage and you'll make more money. But for me, it was great because they came along, and by the end of the interview, I turned them round, and they could see that what I meant, that I was saying it because of the advantage to patients' lives with screening, and not because it was in my own interest. But I mean, those are very exciting times.
Yeah, and I mean, even now that the gentleman that called you when you first got there, he called you from Tampa the other day.
Yeah.
And that's how many years later? About 20?
20 years, yeah.
That he's still alive and well.
He's well, 80s by now.
Yeah, so you provided an incredible service to them, and you taught them their techniques, etc.
Yeah.
And it wasn't to be because our family were a little bit...
But retrospectively, I mean, for me, it couldn't have been better.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, for me to have been there, done it, and I had an incredible time professionally, and then luckily you saw the big picture at the end, and it turned out for us just amazing. I mean,
I don't give myself that credit. It evolved that way, and it worked out perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think for the kids it worked out well. It was tough. It was tough for everybody, but because it's tough, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
No, exactly.
Tempered steel.
So Keith, the Australia period was in the 90s, and then...
Yeah, I think it was probably from the time I was invited first to put on the prostate ultrasound course, early 1990s, until the time we finally packed up and left Australia was late 1990s. So yeah, 1990s was the age of Australia.
You came back to the States, and you decided it was time for you to give back, and you set up a clinic in urology in Belize where you did volunteer work for a number of years.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, basically when I came back, I didn't know what, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. I was trying some various business things that didn't work out. But I really didn't know what I knew I did not want to go into somebody else's department after having, run my own department for five and a half years. I didn't really want to set up my own private practice. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And remember, at one stage there was this one guy who was doing brachytherapy, and we entertained him, and I thought maybe I'd join him and do some teaching. And then professionally, again through Neil Baum, a very good friend, Neil called me up one day and said, "Keith, I know you've come back from Australia, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, nothing really." He said, "I'm trying to find out what to do." He said, "Well, listen, do me a favour. There's this company called Provation who are developing software to describe the operative techniques." He said, I was there. I can't do it myself, but I told them I've got exactly the guy who can do it. And do me a favour, will you just go along and talk to them, and just go and have a talk to them and see what it is. So I went and spoke to them at Provation, and I think on the Monday and on the Tuesday I started working there, and then spent a very happy 15 years there. But you asked about Belize. Shortly after I got back, went with Deborah first on an adventure trip, and we went to Belize, and then went on another adventure trip with Maxine. And then whilst I was on the trip with Maxine, I got the idea that maybe we could do some volunteer work in Belize. And again, after a couple of false starts in Belize City, we found working at Western Regional Hospital in Belmopan, started working with Dr. Rene Godoy, general surgeon, and then you and I went down initially 5-6 times a year doing volunteer work. We certainly in urology collected instruments. Some I had to borrow or steal. Some I bought ourselves. So smuggle some into the country because they wanted to charge us for it, and all the various adventures we had with that. But yeah, that was great. I mean, I really enjoyed doing that. A little bit of urology, still doing some surgery, seeing patients, being in a position to, not to charge anything. Obviously, it was fully all at our expense. And again, if the 1990s was the age or the decade of Australia, the 2000s was the decade of Belize. And then when we went down together, it was fantastic. You did the dermatology and saw the derm patients, and yeah, I think we did quite a bit. We did some good. Yeah,
grateful patients there too, Keith,
yeah.
that you helped.
Yeah, that was fun. That was good.
We had a fun time there.
Oh, we had a great time there with that, and all the opportunities of buying up land and building places, and it was a good time.
Keith, I spoke to Deborah this morning,
Yeah.
and I told her what we were going to be doing, and I asked her if there was anything that she particularly wanted to know about you. We're all interested, but it's particularly meaningful to her because obviously she's followed in your career path. She wanted to know what your motivations are. What motivates you?
I don't know, it's difficult for me to answer that. What motivates me? It's probably easier for me to say what doesn't motivate me. I certainly have not been motivated by the money. That's never been a factor in my life at all. I wouldn't say that I was motivated to go into medicine because I was going to save the world. It's certainly a very gratifying part of being a doctor is helping all patients. And one of the most gratifying things when you see the patient well afterwards, it's very satisfying and gratifying. I don't know what to say. It's just something inside you. You just know what you want to do. What motivated me to do medicine? Well, my dad was the example, obviously. And then, so as I said before, I just did it. No, I've never had to be told to force to study, to work, to do anything. I enjoyed helping the patients. I really enjoyed at the end of doing a good surgery, and you finish the surgery and you say, wow, this is everything has gone well. On the other hand, I really didn't enjoy when things didn't go well. I mean, that's one of the worst things. So you can experience the best when it does go well, and you experience the worst when it doesn't go well, especially if you blame yourself for something that didn't go well. In the academic side, I loved getting the good lectures. I liked, when my colleagues, and certainly senior colleagues, would come up to me and congratulate me. I remember there was one of the heads of urology at Mass Gen or something. I was at the AUA at the Cook Urology stand, and one of the salespeople was talking to me when this guy came up, and then he said to this guy, "Oh, do you know this is Dr. Kaye, the inventor of the Kaye tamponade catheter?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." I said, "Yeah, the only thing is, I wish I would have thought of that." So that was great. So it made me feel good. So those kind of things, made you feel good.
It kind of bridges into two things that she asked to describe what made you most proud in your career, and I think you've touched on that.
I won't say proud, but it's I do enjoy. I enjoy it. Like when some of the best things are now is when her teachers say to her something about, oh, well, I had to use the Kaye tamponade catheter today. Or, when she goes into the side room there and then finds a catheter, one of my catheters there. Or if they, most of them now, the book is now like outdated 30 years, but if somebody comments on the book or on a paper that I've written. So it's, for me, having her in the field, and if she goes to a meeting or something and they show a slide of the Kaye catheter, that's really got to be probably the highlight of my career.
She also asked me to ask you about your inventions. The one you've mentioned is the Kaye camp.
Yeah. Well, that's really the only one that's, as far as an instrument that's really taken off. I had a couple of other ideas of using swabs to go through various instruments that were being done with robotic surgery, but I never got into any of that, and none of those really took off. It's only the Kaye catheter that really has taken off.
And then I'm just looking, I made notes of these. She wanted to know what obstacles you had, if any.
I really did not have any obstacles in my life. I mean, everything, I just had opportunities. It starts with an O, an opportunity. I had opportunities, not obstacles. I had the opportunities to do basically whatever I wanted to do. I mean, heck, talk about being lucky. I could go into medicine. I had the opportunity to go into medicine. I could go into what branch of medicine I wanted to go into. Nobody blocked me going into surgery. Nobody blocked me going into urology. I wanted to do urology. I had the opportunity. I wanted to come to the States. I had the opportunity. I wanted to go, write papers. I had the opportunity. I wanted to publish in journals. I had the opportunity. Everything was an opportunity. I really, can you think of any obstacles that I had?
Uh-huh.
Everything was just, it wasn't all easy. I mean, going to Australia wasn't easy, but I won't call it an obstacle. There was some, it was challenging, but not, and the fact that, I wanted to go and you didn't want to go, it wasn't an obstacle, it was a challenge. And luckily, we worked it out, and it was great, but it wasn't an obstacle. And can you think of any obstacles that I've had?
No.
I mean, I don't know.
No, not at all. The other thing is she wanted to know what would you have done differently. You did allude to not doing general surgery first, but is there anything else?
Well, I think that's the main thing. Is I'd like to have done general surgery for 1 or 2 or 3 years, but not what I did a full 7 years. If I could have, I'm not an if person, but spent more of that time writing more papers or coming to the States earlier and getting the opportunities to see how things were done here. Maybe having more confidence in myself to do things. But I really, I'm thrilled that I did medicine. I absolutely think it's the greatest career in the world. If you've got the opportunity to do it, it's the most amazing thing to. As a doctor, you can do whatever you want to do. So I think that's great. The couple of years I did science gave me a terrific background. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I enjoyed that. Growing up in South Africa, the opportunity to come to the States. I don't think. Can you think of anything else that?
No, but you are, as I even look at you now, you're such a positive a person, and your energy is so good that you do see everything as an opportunity rather than as a potential obstacle.
Yeah, but they have been. I mean, I just.
Okay. Yeah, congratulations, Kaye. I think you're fantastic. And I think, when you say that you were okay, You were never outstanding. You were outstanding in everything. You were an all-rounder. You were.
It's very sweet of you, but I was...
No, you achieved the goals that you set out for yourself, and you know the Australia thing. You came back because your family was here, and you did what you needed to do. So
yeah, well, again, we're very lucky, and as I said, the best thing that ever happened to me in my life is marrying you. It's true.
Thank you.
It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Thank you.
So, yep, there you go. There you go, kids. There you go, kids. That's it. That's your mum and dad, or your dad at this stage. Your mom's still going to come on. Okay, yeah. Thanks. That's good.